So, join us today on the Victim to Victor podcast as we dive deep into the transformative power of nature based therapy with Lindsay Cray, a psychotherapist, clinical consultant, and outdoor leader. As a founder of Integrating Nature LLC, Lindsay brings over 2 decades of groundbreaking work in nature based therapy, helping trauma survivors find healing through intentional and progressive practices. With a career that spans conservation, experiential education, and mental health counseling, Lindsay has redefined trauma rehabilitation by merging the natural world with therapeutic innovation. Her nature based clinical therapy model has successfully guided over 100 military veterans on their journeys through PTSD, depression, and anxiety recovery. Beyond her professional achievements, Lindsay is a seasoned wilderness survival specialist, a certified New York State hiking guide, and a passionate advocate for reshaping mental health culture. Welcome to the show, Lindsay. What an honor to have you here.
Thank you. That was an excellent bio. I was thinking to myself, like, man, I should steal that because I've never written a bio that well about myself.
Perfect. I'll send it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's really wonderful to be here and talk to you today.
Oh,
Appreciate
oh,
it. Yeah.
oh, so me too. And I absolutely love the work that you're doing. And I just think, it's just transformative, for the whole world, really. And so it'd be great for us to understand a bit more about what inspired you to combine nature, and therapy in your work.
The inspiration is really life. I grew up having a lot of nature exposure despite the fact that I lived kind of in a semi-urban environment. I guess it is an urban environment. And I like myself as a child a child of the 80s, let's point that out too, was able to use nature as my safe place growing up because I grew up in a house that was both warm and loving and also filled with a lot of trauma and PTSD because my father was a Vietnam veteran. So that exposure, that immersion, that feeling of safety, that place that I could go to, no matter what else was going on in my life, um, was transformative and magical. And I think that that kind of led me to have a passion about finding a connection with nature at some level of professionalism in my career trajectory. And that went from being a research scientist to an educator, to, now a mental health counselor that also works with veterans and first responders.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And so, um, how have your experiences in conservation and, in the, I know that you're a guide as well. So how has that actually shaped your approach to trauma therapy?
So education kind of came after research, and it's important to point that out because the research trajectory kind of um, dropped education in my lap, not intentionally, right? Like I very much wanted to be a conservation scientist, and I did a lot of work. Two degrees in, well, I have a degree in global environment, another degree in environmental management and risk assessment, and all of that work um, kind of brought me into different spheres of working with different people, whether it be children or young adults or, science professionals. And when I dove deep into the science world, I was really fortunate to be able to go to the United Nations Conference on Climate Change in 2009. And that was a response to a submission that I wrote while I was in college. And that, fast forward a lot of years, landed me working in the tropics. Um, and at some point or another, my former university got in touch with me, and I don't even know, I couldn't even tell you the year at this point, probably 2007 or 8. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And they wanted to offer me a scholarship through the National Science Foundation to do that master's degree. But it was kind of like contingent on the fact that I also serve as an educator in city school districts. in the same city that my college was, the College of Environmental Science and Forestry at Syracuse. So having done that, I fell in love with education. And it was never my intent to fall in love with education. It just happened to be something that I was really good at and enjoyed and, got a lot from, and felt like I was really making a real difference. Because in science, it's an interesting situation where if I'm really generalizing here, a lot of science is about authoring a paper and then getting that paper published, and then that paper's published, and it's really only viewed by the scientific community. It's very rarely viewed by like the public at large, and I kind of felt like I was being pulled away from the real heart of my work, which is to really make an effort to connect people with nature. So when this education piece fell into my lap, it was like, oh, okay, all the puzzle pieces are coming together now, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I loved working with young adults. I worked with adjudicated youth. I worked with youth in Puerto Rico and Mexico, California, New York, all over the place. And all of that work, to say that somehow I kept gravitating towards children and young adults who were struggling to find a connection with themselves and their community and a world larger than themselves. And that link into nature fed that tremendously. And so I started to see something more there. So I kind of drifted away from the science research and drifted more into education and did that for a good long time. And education continued to expose me to other people in different cultures and different places. And that lasted right up until about 2017 when my father got really ill. He wound up being diagnosed with a glioblastoma, which is a really lethal form of brain cancer. People don't live long once they're diagnosed with glioblastoma. And I dropped everything in my life to attend to him. And that 11 months before he passed away was a really transformative time in my life because it forced me into the position of having to confront head on all of the things about my childhood and my relationship with my father, and him as a human being, that I don't think I would have really otherwise confronted to that depth. And I know not to get too deep into the trauma of it, but that was a really, really tough 11 months. And what I came out on the other side with after he passed away is that there was so much healing that he never had a chance to do because the system that he functioned within, the system of the VA, the Veterans Administration here in the States, and generally the mental health system of the US, failed him tremendously. And I wanted better for him. And because I couldn't give it to him, I was going to find a way to be able to offer that to other people. So I took that genuine love of nature, which ironically he spurred in my youth. Um, and the time that I had after his passing, which eventually would coincide with COVID, giving me a lot of time to adjust my trajectory. I went back to college and I got a second master's degree in mental health counseling.
Wow.
And I used that opportunity to work with some amazing collaborators to create this really beautiful curriculum to help specifically people who were dealing with trauma and high stress situations. My particular love, military and first responders. Um, and begin to utilize that curriculum to help these folks in ways that I don't think other systems have been able to help them.
Mm.
So therein lies the transition, and that's still the work that I'm doing, and it's still ever evolving. And here I am today.
Yeah, amazing. Wow, what a journey. I love that.
Yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah, and because obviously, from your expertise, I feel like you could really be able to describe the scientific benefits of nature therapy for my listeners. So, from your own expertise, how does nature-based therapy work in helping trauma survivors to heal?
Great question. I mean, there's a lot of facets to that. So we could have that question alone could be a podcast in and of itself. But if I was going to give you just like a few real, I think like key snippets of all of this, first you have to understand, which seems logical, but maybe a lot of people have forgotten that like we are nature, like we are not separate from that. And given like the very technological, acculturation of our entire world, a lot of people, especially in first world countries, have completely forgotten about how much we are biologically linked with the natural world. We are every bit a part of nature as, you know, a bird outside or a leaf on a tree is. Um, so because we're made up of the same DNA and the same molecules, and we have not been disconnected from nature for that long. I mean, if you consider 99% of human history has evolved right alongside with nature. It's only been in the last maybe 250 years that we've begun to separate ourselves from that. And on an evolutionary timescale, that's not long at all. That's a blip. So much of our development as human beings, as Homo sapiens, as animals, relies on a deep connection with nature, which we are very quickly, and I would say like not so thoughtfully shifting away from, which is where you see depression and anxiety because we have become disconnected from a natural world, which is a part of us and is all around us. It's the idea that we are connected to something much larger than ourselves. So consider this biologically, right? There are bacteria in the soil that when our skin comes into contact with that bacteria, there are receptors on our skin that send signals to our brain to release serotonin. So when we touch soil, serotonin is released in our brain.
Wow.
Um, when we are outside and we are breathing fresh, pure oxygen, it is helping us to rejuvenate like red blood cells, right? It is oxygenating our blood and is allowing us to rejuvenate red blood cells in our system. When we hear birds outside, the sound of birds indicates the absence of predators. And if there are absence of predators, it means that there is an increase in our feeling of safety and well-being. So just being able to hear birds outside lowers our stress response because naturally we attribute that to safety, lack of predators, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is our deep connection with trees. I mean, anybody who took a science class growing up in elementary school knows that we breathe out carbon dioxide and trees respire oxygen. So that is a very symbiotic relationship, and that trees give what we need and we give what trees need.
True.
Trees also give off this really interesting chemical called a phytoncide, and that's basically like a tree pheromone. And I'm making that up. So a tree pheromone, if you will. I'm giving like finger quotes here. And when we breathe that in, it reduces our stress response. It lowers our blood pressure and reduces our respiration. Again, decreasing stress and allowing ourselves to feel a chance of, or sorry, a sense of relaxation, allowing us, you know, a chance to just kind of like chill out, if you will. So there's a lot more that I could say about that, but
Um,
you know, just the idea of how deeply we are, you know, connected with nature, both in our physical system and in our mental, our neurological system, it speaks volumes to how much we still need that. And when you are outside and you are processing in nature, whatever it is that you're dealing with, but in particular, stress and trauma, there's a very you know, distinctive feeling of being nurtured by that space for all of the reasons and more that I just explained, right?
wow, love that. Oh my God. And to be honest, that's the first time I've heard it described in such amazing detail because, I see it all the time. I mean, I was doing Kundalini yoga for many years, and, I saw so many of the practitioners just kind of surrendering and just, be like kind of lying down on the earth and, really absorbing the soil. And again, I never understood why. I just thought, oh, it's like a grounding exercise, but that makes sense now, because they
Yeah.
were connecting with the soil.
For sure. And there's other science behind that too. I mean, if you consider like human beings are giant batteries. We
Mm,
are. We're like we say, everybody says energy, and some people think that that's woo-woo, but it's also very true. Like if you hook us up to an EKG machine,
mm,
you can see the battery moving. You can see the battery like creating energy, right? Our heartbeat is electric. So when you are just in a raw form laying down on the physical earth,
mm.
your electricity is connecting with the electricity of the earth. Your positive and negative ions are mixing directly with the earth's positive and negative ions. Like that's a I don't want to get into like any deeper science behind that, but consider the earth is electric and we are electric, and those things connect, on so much more of a deeper level than you can see or smell or hear. Like it's physically happening to your system, which is very different than you doing therapy in an office with recirculated air, and a lot of offices don't have any windows and there's fluorescent lighting. It's really hard to feel safe in a space like that, or fully engaged with your whole system in
True.
in a space like that when it's so limiting.
Yeah, so true, true. And so obviously, we live now in the winter where the days are short, and so some people might not even be able to get out until it gets dark, which is about, 4:30, 5 p.m. here. So is it still the same with breathing in outside air? Yeah.
It's the same, although I was outside for the whole morning yesterday. Yesterday morning I had a client that was in a complete state of crisis, and all they wanted to do was walk and climb hills.
Wow.
And, by the time that client had finished with their session, there was a lot more logical, cohesive thinking because they had gotten all of that very like escalated crisis mental state energy out of their system. There was a really cold, strong wind blowing, and that's the equivalent to like you and I were talking about sitting in the ice bath, right? So if you can't go sit in an ice bath, climb to the top of a hill and stand in front of a really cold breeze.
Wow.
So we do go outside as often as possible, but when there are clients that can't go outside, we are indoors, and sometimes we can try to, how do I want to say, like, you know, reinvent the nature exposure as best as possible. So using an ice pack, maybe from a refrigerator, or using specific scents in like oil-based scents in a diffuser.
Yeah.
The I read somewhere that the scent of like pine or fir, including like lavender and whatever else, can also be really calming for the system. So I'll put some of that in my diffuser in the office,
Wow.
or we'll play some nature sounds. I have plants in my office, so whatever we can do to kind of like help to recreate
Imitate that.
um,
Oh,
those
beautiful.
natural spaces.
So is that what you do in your nature-based clinical therapy model?
Is the indoor or the outdoor version?
Oh, well, yeah. So, well, I guess what I'm referring to is the one that you've developed for military veterans.
Ah, yes. Okay, yeah. So, I refer to that as core calm, and that that clinical model is um, usually applied in a group setting. So I can do some of that work with the individual, but part of what makes that model so incredible is that it allows a lot of group teamwork and community building. So individually, well, I guess individually or in a group model, there are components that include a fire, a natural space, a constructed kind of like fire circle, if you will, a place where you can sit and gather around the warmth of that fire. Um, Optimally, there's access to some sort of water, whether it's a trickling stream or maybe the shoreline of a lake or a pond. Trees, really important. Sitting in an open field sometimes can make things difficult in like strong winds. Um, and all of these different components, earth, air, fire, and water, are all then applied within the context of traditional ecological knowledge, TEK. And this knowledge comes from different traditional cultures all over the world. So we're not talking like just indigenous cultures from the US, but other traditional cultures from different places that have lent their um, knowledge about ways that they connect with nature and ways that it has felt traditionally healing for them.
Wow.
And then it's also combined with concepts that I've pulled from dialectical behavioral therapy, which is essentially crisis management, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is essentially psychoeducation on how the mind works, um, strengths-based interventions, and person-centered interventions. And then, of course, there's some narrative therapy as well, which is learning how to change the narrative about the way you are perceiving things in the world from your perception to the reality of how it's actually occurring. Because trauma can color perception. And
Oh,
so we take all of this and without giving away too much, we mix this all in a clinical curriculum that runs over the course of 12 weeks, and it builds from basic mindfulness and self-awareness exercises all the way up into practicing like resiliency and distress tolerance. And that might look like, giving some sort of exercise or challenge outside that is in all aspects very safe, but can mimic a stressful situation to allow the person to experience stress in a way that is easily manageable, so that they have that immersion while at the same time being able to successfully go through stress management. And then down the other side, imagine it like a bell curve, right? So we start very simple. By the middle of that program, we might have them peak at distress tolerance. And by the time you come out at the other side of it, they are working on advanced practices of resiliency and self-awareness and equanimity and so on and so forth. And then there's a cohesive kind of rite of passage at the very on the very last day of the program. And that 12-week program, again, is more about working together with a group to process experiences and trauma that have happened. A lot of times we call that operational stress injury.
okay.
Um, and when I'm working with a client, a single client, I'll practice those same types of coping skills um, and skill building, but it may not look as straightforward and consecutive as it would be with a group because um, clients have different needs on different days, and we might need to address something very specific. Hey, XYZ happened in my family, or I lost my job, or I got another DWI, or things like that that happen in everyday life with people who are struggling that might require us to address that specific thing on that day rather than following a curriculum,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So
that,
does that help answer your question?
yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah,
No
amazing.
problem.
And so what challenges do military veterans face when seeking trauma rehabilitation?
A lot of the same challenges as regular human beings. I think the big thing that gets in the way is um, the mentality of military culture. And we're talking not just about veterans, but this also spills over into similar cultures, um, you know, uh, first responders, EMTs, and paramedics, right? Veterans and police officers and firefighters, and also frontline workers. So these are like the doctors and the nurses that are working in the emergency rooms and have been, or the traveling nurses that became, I guess like spotlighted during the times of COVID. These are people who are constantly dealing with high operational stress injury. And the culture for these groups across the board is very similar in that we don't talk about it. Because if we talk about it, it means that we're not still able to do our jobs. If we're worrying about it, it means that we're not in a mental state where we can be proficient at our job rather than, hey, we do need to talk about it because we haven't had enough of a break, or you experienced a really traumatic situation and now you're going to turn around 24 hours later and put yourself into an equally traumatic situation, you know? And that's the expectation when you work in a field like that. But that's also why we see um, like such extreme cases of PTSD and suicidality, why we see people not being able to hold down a job or have, such high rates of substance abuse issues It's because these are all symptomatic of being under constant and extreme stress all the time. Threat to life, threat to well-being, exposure to having to take somebody else's life or trying to save somebody's life and not being able to do that because of, reasons that were completely out of your control. Um, that's a long, you know, 10, 4 years, 10 years, 20 years is a long time to hold down a career in a situation like that without seeing some kind of, external effects manifest from constant exposure to stress.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I said, we have like not being able to interact with your family, isolation, not being able to hold down a job after you've maybe been discharged from the military or retired from a first responder career. Um, there can be violence or there can be isolation. There can be drug use or there can be overeating. There can be, being able to connect with everybody else except for your spouse. So there's all kinds of ways that this shows up, but it just shows up more intensely with these professions.
Ah, interesting. Thank you so much for explaining that. But yeah, there is. I know that in the army culture, even here, they just don't want to talk about what happened to them. I mean, even after they leave the army, they do actually get funding like to actually seek therapy, but they just want to forget about it and just
Or
move on with their lives and not even talk about what happened, all of the horrible things they might have experienced. And so, yeah, I just feel like it's their culture to just remain quiet.
Yep, it is it is culture, and the other part of it is, I mean, it's very complex, right? Some of it can be guilt, some of it can be feelings of like, oh, other people, actually a lot of it can be other people had it worse than me. I don't
Mm,
think I've ever counseled a single veteran that hasn't said that. Oh, I didn't go get my service-connected disability benefits because other people needed it more than me. Every veteran I've ever counseled, no matter what their degree of exposure to trauma was, has said something like that. Um, and that's false,
mm,
categorically false. Everybody deserves it equally. If there was a way that the VA here could monetize exposure to trauma, they would. And they
wow.
haven't yet because they can't. They can't make comparisons. So um, there is there is the culture, and there's also the culture of because nobody ever talked about it with me and nobody told me what was not appropriate to talk about. I'm
Mm,
afraid to talk about it. I'm afraid to say something about it. And then there's also, I don't want to relive this because it was horrible and because nobody else will understand, or maybe people will think that I'm a monster, or maybe people will think that, they'll hear what I did and they'll agree that the mistake that I made and that I'm responsible for so much disaster or so many deaths. And when you really break it down, when they really open up and eventually learn how to have that discussion, that's where the narrative therapy comes in. You're able to see the narrative for how it actually happened versus how you remember it in the traumatic moment. Oh God, this is all my fault. I mean, when my father passed away, not at all the same thing as serving in the military, but when my father passed away, for years I blamed myself because I thought, had I only done a little bit more research, had I only tried harder, had I only made one more phone call to one more university or one more research clinic, maybe I could have found the silver bullet, like somehow as if I was going to be the savior that was going to, fix glioblastoma, that I was going to find the cure.
yeah,
Um, and that's what happens when you are in a state of trauma. There's a lot of illogical thought, a lot of blame. So yeah, like I said, it's really complex. It's really, really complex. And we have to leave space for that too.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. So, what would you say are the common misconceptions about nature-based therapy?
Um, well, there's a lot of misconceptions about nature-based therapy. Mostly when people hear me say that, if they don't understand or they're not educated on a clinical level, they think we're go out into the forest and hug trees and sing Kumbaya. It is very much not that at all. Especially if you're doing trauma work in nature, it is actually very intense and it requires a really skilled background, not only in the clinical work, but understanding how to keep people safe in a natural outdoor exposed environment.
Mm,
So for myself, I'm a licensed wilderness first responder, which is kind of one notch down from being a wilderness EMT. Um, I can't administer medications, but I can definitely administer life-saving techniques for people in wilderness and outdoor settings. I'm also a New York State licensed outdoor guide, which means that I have a license to be able to guide people outside in natural spaces, whether that be backcountry or just, for an hour or 2 hour walk in a local park. Um, I also have oh my God, I'm going to date myself here, but about 20 years worth of experience with wilderness survival skills. And so, not a lot of the survival part comes up as a clinician, but the skills and applications have been taken and adjusted appropriately to be used as exercises for coping skill building and stress management.
Okay.
So that has helped a lot. And then the other piece to understand when you're working outside with nature is that you're not using nature, you are collaborating with or partnering with nature because your relationship to that natural space
Mm.
is very, very meaningful for the healing process. And this is where I start to shift away from having a science mind to being more culturally attuned to the traditional ecological knowledge that I've gained. And it's thanks to a lot of traditional indigenous communities that I have interacted with over the course of my career. A lot of my knowledge comes from having very generous, open-hearted people share their knowledge and wisdom with me and give me permission to be able to use this um, in ways that are healing for people in my culture, right? As a white person. Um, so the relationship to nature is critical, that we're not out here utilizing this space for our own gain. It's about seeing your relationship in the world. And again, like I said before, that connection to something that is larger than yourself. And some people find this through spirituality. And some people find this through religion, and some people maybe don't find that at all, which is, that's their journey. Part of my journey has been finding my relationship to nature and helping people to see their relationship to nature as well, which splitting into that science mind is factually evident and true that every human being has a relationship to nature. So I think that's the important part is this is a very multifaceted practice. And I would not suggest that just any person take their client out into the field and try to do therapy without having some skills and practice and training beforehand.
Perfect, thank you. And so what's next for Integrating Nature LLC?
To continue doing what I'm doing and being able to get out there and work with more facilities that do rehabilitation for these, populations, the veteran and first responder population. There's a lot of really great programs out there, and I think those programs can perhaps be even more enhanced. We're always learning and we're always growing in this field. Professionally, it's nice to know that there's more out there that we can apply. So I will continue to do that and continue with education. So consulting education, and then of course, offering services to as many people as possible. You don't need to be a veteran or a first responder to work with me. I'm happy to work with anybody, but this is what happens. We just keep expanding and expanding. That's the
Absolutely.
hope.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And so what does the phrase great medicine comes from within mean to you in the context of your work?
Excellent question. Nobody has ever asked me that before, but I love that you pulled that out of my email. Um, so the healing comes from within you, that nobody else is going to give you the healing that you need, right? You have to be willing to look inward. Um, Somebody once told me this really amazing proverb, and I'll never forget this. So the proverb goes, at the time that Great Spirit decided that human beings needed to heal. Great Spirit wanted to give humans a gift, and it called together all beings of the earth to try and come up with the best way to give the gift to these human beings, right? And it called on all of these beings, and the buffalo stepped up and said, "Give it to me, and I will take it, and I will bury it deep within the plains of the earth where the humans will never find it." And the Great Spirit said, "Even then, humans will dig into the core of the earth and they will find it there." And Crow came and said, "Give it to me, I will take it, and I will fly it high into the sky where human beings will never be able to reach it, for they don't have any wings." And the Creator said, "Humans will eventually learn how to fly and spread their wings, and even in the sky, they will find it there." So then the great salmon said, "Come and give it to me. I will take it and I will swim it to the bottom of the ocean. And there they will never be able to find it." And the Creator said, "Even there at the bottom of the ocean, eventually they will go and they will find it." And then the mother who sees with no eyes, but sees everything, said, "Give it to me and I will take it and I will place it inside of them." And the Creator said, "It is done."
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing. Wow. Okay. Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And so where can my listeners find you?
You can just find me right on my website. I don't have a huge social media presence and I like it that way. But if you're looking for more information about me, you can just go to integratingnature.com, or sorry, integrating-nature.com. And or you can email me at Lindsay, Lindsay, at integrating-nature.com. And I'm pretty easy to communicate with that way.
Oh, excellent. And do you, I suppose, are all your sessions in person based?
No. I'm pretty flexible, like I'm not anti-technology, so I have clients that actually I've only ever worked with through telehealth, and that's okay too, but I do outdoor therapy, I have an office, and I also do telehealth work. And then I also do consulting. So if you're somebody that's not necessarily looking for clinical work, but you're looking for something more on the consulting side of things to understand how to maybe integrate some of this with your own practice, or you want to learn more about what nature-based therapy is and how to integrate that into your own life, I'm happy to talk.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been an absolute honor. I've found this episode fascinating myself, just understanding more about what you do and how important it is to connect with nature. I mean, we say it all the time, oh, go and get some fresh air, go and breathe in some, pure oxygen. But then it's understanding why that's so beneficial for us. And it's, in particular, if you are currently going through your own healing journey, it's just the importance of really doing that and really embracing it. Thank you. Yeah. And yeah, I absolutely loved it.
I really appreciate it. And as a final word, I'll just say, remember, to everybody, nature is not an abstract background that you are simply staring at through a window. Like, it is a part of who you are as a human being. And if you forget your connection with that, then there's something still missing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I love that. So, yeah, my beautiful listeners, please do get in contact with Lindsay if you have any questions about the work that she does or about this episode. If you want to find out more, I'm sure she'd be honored to hear from you. And yeah, please do drop me a line as well if you have any questions. And we always love to hear from you. So until the next episode, that's all we have time for today. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you again, Lindsay. And yeah, I look forward to seeing everyone in the next show.